Welcome back to Sermon Rewind. My name is still Todd, and with me again, back this week, is the lead pastor of Bethany, DJ Jazzy Jordan.
Always here and happy to be so.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
So, ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Another Sermon Rewind.
Get to it.
All right. Continuing the Jesus People series and the very helpful and efficient one-word sermon answers, or one-word sermon titles, I should say.
Yeah.
This week it's love. The text was from the book of Romans, chapter 12, verses 9 to 21. And your big idea was real love hates evil and holds fast to what is good.
Yeah, I agree.
And well, I hope so, because you wrote it. And of
Actually,
course,
I didn't. It's out of the first verse. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And of course, my first thought was Van Halen.
Do tell.
Well, because the song, When It's Love, and they sing, how do I know when it's love? And the response is, I can't tell you, but it lasts forever.
Here's the era and genre problem we're having.
Okay. And that's actually, that's fairly biblical.
Okay.
If you look at it through the biblical lens, is it not?
I'd agree with the statement, sure.
All right. We're not going to get into the genre. And
no.
Yeah,
we'll
get
to
to
that
that
time
later.
for that.
We don't. Okay. So I'm going to jump right in and ask the first question, because in your intro, before you got to the points, you were talking about how the idea of love can get away from us. It's often misunderstood. It's thrown around. It's used. It's applied to everything from dessert to people to whatever it is.
You got it.
Right. And it can actually be abused.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You also alluded to the idea that love is often self-serving. We express a level of what we call love because we expect to get something back from it.
Utility, I think, is the term I use.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, and when you look through the lens of our own sinful nature, can we even understand what real love is?
Yeah, for sure. I would say, not through purely human experience, right? Not through how much time and energy we spend in any number of books or watching rom-coms or, listening to 80s and 90s R&B music. Like, we're not learning love or even identifying it well by those means. But, to not sound cliche at all, yes, through scripture and particularly in the person of Jesus. 1 John chapter 4, believe starting in verse 7, the big sort of wonderful illuminous picture is painted. God is love. And John goes on to say that we not love in general. He is a particular type of love that is known by his sending Jesus into the world so that people like us could both experience it and be free. So I would say, yes, we can know it because Christ isn't sort of lavishly loving us from afar. He's doing it very intimately and personally, but also the scriptures are just boiling over with this language and very direct pictures of what this looks like. So I think the more familiar we become with Jesus himself, and the more familiar we become through or become with the gospel narrative all throughout the scriptures, I think it's impossible not to know it or identify it.
So in your first point, you said real love, we're sticking with this theme of real love, seeks radical service.
Mm-hmm.
Not just service,
Correct.
Radical service.
Absolutely.
Right? And you were talking about how when we engage in this as Christians, we shouldn't fake it. This should be genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about gratitude. We've talked about that a lot. The idea that our response to grace is not obligation or guilt, it's gratitude because we're receiving something we don't deserve. Along those lines, if we're going to be transparent, and again, this is our struggle, right? Do we give the answers that we know we're supposed to give, or do we give the real answers? So what if my non-fake response is that I don't feel like engaging in radical service. I feel like doing what I want to do. Or, and it's possible you might have some older folks in the congregation who might say, I used to do service when I was younger and I had more energy and whatever, but I feel like my time is done. Let the other people do service. How do you respond to either of those? The transparent response of, or just the, I've done my time?
Yeah. So a transparent response, this is probably going to sound a little harsh, but I do think it's true. Again, that First John text I was looking at or speaking about earlier, John goes on to say in the first few verses, he says that we ought to love one another. And if anyone does love, he's pointing to this radical Christian love, I believe, then they know God. I would contend then on the flip side of that coin, anyone that says, yeah, I'm just not interested in living out a radical, Christ-honoring, loving, servant-hearted life. I'm just not interested in that. I don't like it. It's not my thing. Happy to just punch my card, lift my hands, sing a few songs, and go home. I would say that person is either A, completely removed from a deep and abiding knowledge of who God is and has not received the great benefit of Christ's overwhelming altruistic love in their life, or it's been a while. It's been a while since they've really sort of dove into that and allowed that to wash over them. I'm not going to sit here and nitpick with people about whether or not I'm saying that they are saved or not saved. That's such a moot point to me at this point. I'm talking about digging deep and living into the grand love story, right? You may very well just not be doing that. I would find it very hard if, for example, if my wife said, oh my gosh, I love you so much. I did this incredible altruistic thing for you. And if my response was like, there's a problem, right? There's a noticeable problem. So on the one hand, first question, yeah, address that, because I think there is something to be said about not wanting to. My heart breaks when I hear folks say that. Second question, I did it once. I used to do it. Whenever I have a conversation, someone tells me, I used to serve at such and such a place. Oh, well, why don't you do it anymore? Well, I did my time. I have a real hard time with that, because it gives this impression that that there's a retirement age for kingdom ministry and a retirement age for living into the following of Jesus, right? And there's just not. Sure, maybe you're not coming to the church work day, or you're not, with kingdom causes at Margaret's house, digging ditches, right? But maybe you're there just hugging the people as they come through that are. Or maybe you're, sitting in your home on a Saturday and you're like, you know what? I met a new person that started coming to Bethany or coming to whatever church, and I'm just going to write them a letter and encourage them and let them know I'm so excited that they're here, and I'm so excited to be running around and patting their little kids on the head. You can still serve, and you can still serve radically, faithfully, and with love at the forefront of what's happening. Absolutely.
Okay. So in your second point, you said real love seeks radical sacrifice. And you were talking about the struggle that American Christians have with this idea, because it doesn't necessarily jive with the cultural values of our country. Lots of good things about our country, lots of positive things. Mm-hmm. But life, liberty, pursuit of happiness it's not always biblical. It's not always biblically applied. It can be very much about ourselves, sure, right? Maximizing my life.
It is entirely about ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I was trying.
You're being real charitable.
I was being charitable, but we're trying to be balanced here. So without sort of rebelling against, I guess, the positive elements of our country, our culture, this is where we live.
Yeah.
Right.
Happy to.
What are some ways Christians in this country can sort of hold themselves accountable to that which is biblical, but not always strictly American in that regard when it comes to sacrifice?
Yeah. You have to separate the two, right? America is I would say in some respects a wonderful dream, right? And all the things that come with it. Well, not all the things, but lots of things that come with it are amazing, probably better than most places in the world. That being said, America is not the kingdom of heaven. America will not last on into eternity. There will be many things that America is judged for and that will disappear from all existence, like with many organized countries throughout the globe, when Christ comes, returns for his people, and establishes his kingdom in totality on the earth. So we have a due diligent responsibility over the course of our lives, whether it's based around sacrifice or no, we'll just stick with sacrifice. We have a responsibility to say, I'm a citizen of another place, though for the time being, I get the great, gracious opportunity to be on mission here, right? This is my home. And as a result, this is where all my upbringing and all of my life and all the principles that matter come to bear. So I reflect this place wherever I am. I don't necessarily walk around with an American flag because, frankly, that doesn't always uphold the principles of the kingdom. And like I said before, it won't last. So we have a responsibility to open up the scriptures and say, here's what we have seen in the sacrificial lives of kingdom people. And it's our job, if we agree that we are of the same place, to say, I must emulate these same behaviors, even if it's in contradiction to the place I find myself right now. That's all over the place in the New Testament. In fact, read the book of Acts and tell me that wasn't the constant problem, right? Why was John and Peter getting beat up and thrown in jail? It wasn't because they were horrible individuals, but it was because they were landing in a place. They were upholding kingdom values sacrificially at the cost of going against the grain of the place they found themselves. If Christians are fitting comfortably into America without any bumps or hiccups or sacrificial cost to it, something's wrong. Something is truly wrong. And we need to evaluate that, and we need to decide where we live and go from there.
So last question, in your third point, you said real love seeks radical solutions. And you were talking a little bit about competition, and you weren't necessarily suggesting that Christians should compete.
Sure. Well,
right. You sort of were.
Yeah.
Right. Your line was, if you must compete, because we know that, again, because of our sinful nature, once Christians start competing, then it often becomes a very worldly thing than a biblical thing.
Yeah, we have a nasty history, don't we?
Right. Yeah. And we start ranking and we start comparing and that sort of thing. But along those lines, you were saying if we were going to compete about anything, we should go above and beyond when it comes to serving, right? Just go beyond all the way, right? Just serve, right? How do we know what is above and beyond? Because I can convince myself very quickly that I do enough and that I do more than somebody else. How do I find that balance between not making it an earthly competition, but also using the community as whatever a benchmark it is to go above and beyond? Or am I thinking about it all wrong? Is there an independent above and beyond that I can sort of pursue in order to kind of meet the spirit of that?
No, that's a great question. And truth be told, I think we could, I think the above and beyond is really, the bar is super low. Truth be told, in most churches, the bar is crazy low. It would not be hard for people to break the ceiling, so to speak, with regard to service. But when we read Paul saying, outdo one another, be competitive with one another, not so that someone gets their name on the board with the gold star, right? But it is to say, if we're going to spend our lives thrusting our energy towards something, it should be that every time that Todd and Laura do something fantastically just kind-hearted and awesome to my family, I should be so moved in gratitude that my heart, as it sort of warms over, should be like, I can't wait, not just to return the favor for my own vanity, so I can check off that guilt box, but because I so love what they just did for me that I'm going to outdo them in showing how much, right? And not just to our friends, but to everybody, to people outside the church as well. When you meet somebody that says, oh, I'm church shopping, or I'm looking for a place to call home, looking for community. I've never, in over 20 years of ministry, I've never heard someone say, I'm looking for a place where my wife and my kids and I, where we can just spend our lives alongside other people who I can just lay it all down. And then we can encourage one another to do more than we did the previous year, and more than the previous year, and more. Never have I heard that. I always hear, I'm looking for great programs. They're not bad things. I'm looking for great music. I'm looking for the kind of preacher that makes me laugh so my 30 minutes isn't dreadfully boring. Rarely do I hear, I want to be around other brothers and sisters who in the faith, we encourage one another to love and good works in such a way that we are growing magnificently in these areas. And the world around us is like, I have no idea what's going on over there, but it's kind of a spectacle I want to check out. You never hear that because that is outside of the paradigm of the culture of the American church. It just is. I hate it. I wish it was different. And I'm going to fight the rest of my life to try to do something about it. But yeah, when it comes to sacrifice, just the bare minimum at this point, and encouraging one another at the bare minimum would be a very unique transition for us all together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
For sure.
All right. Thank you again for joining us on Sermon Rewind. We hope you had an opportunity to dig into some real love this week. We hope you feel the real love of Christ. If you have comments or questions, leave them in the comments section on YouTube, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.